Good morning. As the number of COVID-19 cases in Texas skyrocket, we're now at our highest levels that we've ever been. I have a lot more questions from parents regarding what to do about exchanges and possession and visitation. So we're going to discuss that today on another edition of Coffee with Law. Thank you for joining me. My name is Benjamin Sanchez, and I'm an attorney in Houston, Texas. I represent consumers, tenants, and homeowners in everyday life setbacks to help them move forward. In addition, I have a family law practice, and that is part of what we'll be discussing today. So, what happens when you are concerned about COVID-19 and whether or not you should exchange your child and what rights you have to possession if the other parent is withholding the child? Quite frankly, when the pandemic first started, the Texas Supreme Court jumped on this relatively quickly. I wouldn't say it was immediate because there were a lot of concerns back in February, March, and early April about what to do with all these cases because parents were refusing to exchange the child and not let the other parent visit, and they were blaming it on COVID. I can't tell you for each case whether that concern was legitimate or not, but obviously there was concern that using COVID as an excuse could somehow be taken advantage of. So the Texas Supreme Court stepped in, and on April 27th, they issued an emergency order. It's called the 12th Emergency Order, and I'm going to share my screen with you and show you that part of the order that uh, talks about this. So as you see here, this is the Texas Supreme Court order, the 12th Emergency Order regarding COVID. And if we go down to paragraph 6 of this order, see here. All right. So in paragraph 6, the Texas Supreme Court said this, and I'm going to go ahead and read it just so that we can talk about it. In determining a person's right to possession of and access to a child under a court-ordered possession schedule in a suit affecting the parent-child relationship, the existing trial court order shall control in all instances. Possession of and access to a child shall not be affected by any shelter-in-place order or other order restricting movement issued by a governmental entity that arises from the pandemic. The original public school schedule shall also control, and possession and access shall not be affected by the school's closure that arises from the pandemic. Nothing herein prevents parties from altering a possession schedule by agreement if allowed by their court orders, or courts from modifying their orders on an emergency basis or otherwise. So let's sort of dissect what that means. So first of all, in most family law orders in Texas, the courts, first and foremost, say that the language in the order applies if the parents don't agree. So it'll usually say something to the effect of the parents can agree to whatever they want, but should they not agree, these are the orders that apply. So it's really important for that last sentence that if the parents can agree upon something, they're free to do so. Okay? And most court orders will have that language. However, the Texas Supreme Court recognizes that not all family court orders will have that language. And there is a good reason for that as well, because we're talking about the best interest of the children. And sometimes the courts do not want to give the parents the power to agree to something other than what's in the court, because it's in the child's best interest not to let those parents make those decisions in that way. There could be any number of things, whether it's some sort of abuse, whether it's some sort of assault or drug use. There are any number of situations where a court might not want the parents to have the ability to make agreements. So they're going to go ahead and and not have that language in there. But to the extent that the language is in there, as in most orders from family law courts in Texas, then the Texas Supreme Court continues that and says, of course, the parents can agree to whatever they want. Now, just in everyday life, if you are parents, then obviously you should do what's in the best interest of the children. And if you can agree without making it, some sort of legal matter, then you should. Okay. The other part here is the very last sentence that says that the courts, of course, can modify whatever orders they have on an emergency basis or otherwise. Okay. So it gives them some wiggle room. But really, the bulk of that paragraph 6 is basically saying, look, you cannot use the pandemic as an excuse to not abide by whatever current court order there is. And in fact, whatever county orders or city orders are in place are not going to be affected. They're not going to affect the family order that's in place. Okay? So when we've talked about a shelter in place or stay at home, one of the exceptions is obviously doing exchanges. Okay, as long as you are doing an exchange, even if there's a stay at home order in place by the local government, you can still do that. I always recommend, quite frankly, to all my family law clients, and I'm going to recommend it to all of you now, is to have a copy of your current order, whether that's the temporary orders in a pending case or a final order, okay, to have a copy of that order in your glove compartment at all times. If you do that, if you ever get pulled over, if there's ever a question at an exchange, if police are ever called because something's going on at an exchange, you always have that order. Instead of trying to remember, I need to bring a copy of that order just in case I get pulled over during the stay-at-home order or something might happen during the exchange. If you simply put a copy of your current order in your glove compartment, you'll always have it. And you can always refer to it, and you can always show someone else that. So the Texas Supreme Court basically is saying that you have to abide by the current order that you're controlled by. There is not really room to argue about this, okay? Because people can take advantage of the COVID reason to deny access when there really isn't any reason to do so. That is a big concern. Now, I've had some people say, well, my household has COVID, and I don't want that child coming to my household, or I'm concerned about the other parent not having, they disagree with me, for example, about masks and wearing masks and things like that. Okay, these are going to be parenting decisions. Every parent is different, but you have to be able to abide by the current court order. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. You've seen this. The Texas Supreme Court says you have to abide by current court orders. You can agree otherwise if the language is in there, or the courts can modify it by emergency. So on a practical level, okay, if you're concerned about COVID, there's got to be a really good reason, and you have to take it up with the court if you think that there's some emergency that necessitates doing something different than what's in your court order. Right now, as I film this, this is the fourth Friday of June 2020. In most Texas court orders, this is not an exchange weekend. Okay, so that means for most people, you're going to have all of this coming week to potentially try to get a TRO or emergency order if you feel like that's something that you need to go to the court for. Quite frankly, the courts are open and able to deal with it. However, how they deal with it and the procedures that they use are going to be different by county and different by court. So if you're not represented by an attorney, you have to understand that the court still has to treat you as if you have read the law and you have read all existing policies and procedures that affect the operations of the court, especially during this pandemic. So, for example, in Harris County, there are some special orders that have been in place for all of the family district courts. And then, in addition, each particular court has their own policies and procedures about how to get emergencies in front of the court, about what kind of evidence is necessary or the form of the evidence. We've talked about the fact that in Texas, you can have a declaration instead of an affidavit. So there are all sorts of things that come up. Again, if it's a true emergency, you can seek guidance or protection from the court, but you cannot take it upon yourself to withhold your child from the other parent because you're concerned about this or that. Now, if you are the receiving parent and you don't want your child because you want to protect your child because your household has COVID, then obviously you need to talk to the other parent who currently has the child. And hopefully, for the best interest of that child and the benefit of everybody involved, y'all can come to some sort of agreement regarding makeup time. Maybe that child doesn't come over because of COVID, but you, as a parent who's responding to the other parent, should say, okay, I understand your household has COVID, and it would be best if the child stayed here, and I agree with you. And you know what? The child does need to have some time with you. So I'm going to go ahead and let's work out some makeup time since I'm going to have an extra weekend or whatever the case may be. Okay, so just common sense, people. Try to agree during this pandemic. This pandemic is hard enough on parents as it is, it's hard enough on children as it is. Let's not make it any harder. And for the July possessions that are coming up for summer, again, nothing has changed. Okay. So you need to be able to make the exchange and let that other parent have the July possession. Again, if there's some reason why there shouldn't be, you need to go to court for that. Don't take it upon yourself. So these are the kind of issues that you should be discussing with a lawyer if you feel like there are some issues. I hope I've given you enough enlightenment regarding that. But remember, the Texas Supreme Court has said that you cannot use it as an excuse on your own. Thank you for joining me for another edition of Coffee with Law. As COVID spikes in Texas, we have a really unprecedented time here. In fact, Governor Abbott has just starting to close down the bars at noon today again, and limiting restaurant capacity. I see that he's closed down the rafting and tubing businesses in Texas for a while. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Let's not add to it by having an unnecessary family squabble about the exchange and possession of our children. Again, this is Benjamin Sanchez. Thank you for watching. Have a good weekend. Bye bye.